Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be taking you through how I created this 2.5D platformer using Coplay in Unity. For this I used auto-improve on, and I started this project with Chat Gemini 3 Pro, but later on I found out it was running a bit slowly and it was giving me a bit of issues, so I switched to OpenAI GPT 5.2, and I found that that worked a lot faster and smoother for what I needed to do. And it got me to this end product you see here. I'll be showcasing all of this using a pre-recorded video showing my steps of going through the creation. Okay, here you can see is my first initial prompt that I did. I set out a task list that I wanted to do in the beginning. I also added 3 asset packs, one for the character, which included animations and textures, sprites, 2D sprites, and then a bandit one for the enemies, which included animation and the sprites, and then also an asset pack for 2D coins and stuff like that. So I gave it this prompt with the asset packs linked, and I told it to please, using this task list, create the character controller, the animations, set up the animations, then camera follow, enemy AI, and then the collectibles for the game. Okay, so the first thing it does it creates the task list with all the 5 tasks that I set it up for it, and it adds it to its steps that it needs to do. Then it first is going to do is get the input system to set up the character controller, and then it's going to set up the player controller script for the movement of the character, and then the collectible script for the picking up of said the collectibles in the scene and how it handles this with the player. And then also the camera follow script, which goes hand with the player controller, because you want the camera to be following the player as the game progresses. You don't want the camera to stay behind. There you go. You can see it has populated the scene with the sprites of the bandits, and it's created the floor-based ground asset. Now it's going to go and set up the hero. There you go. See the hero is set up into a scene, and it's doing a setup script to set it up into the scene. As you see, executes the setup script. It also added the coin, but that is very small. I will go ahead and ask it to change that later on. It says it completes all 4 of the 5 tasks. Goes and adjusts a few of the scripts, the player controller, just to work better. It found a few issues just to make the ground check for it. Then it updated the task list, got the screenshot to check if everything looks correct, and checks for compiler errors to make sure nothing is broken, did it wrong. And here you can see the full implementation of what it did. So it set up the character controller, has a 3D rigid body, but it's locked to the Z axis. Set up the animation for the player and the enemy AI, and then the camera follows the enemy AI so that it will attack the player and move towards the player, and then set up the scene for it to work, and then the collectibles. Okay. So I tested the scene and I found that the player couldn't attack. So I told it to add the ability for the player to attack. And I knew there was a animation for the attack in the asset pack. So also here I started seeing Gemini 3 was running a bit slow, so I switched to Chat GPT here at 5.2 here. That's why you see I sent it twice, because I restored to checkpoint. So the first thing it does, it updates the player controller script to add the attack animation script and the attack logic, and it's updating the player controller script again, and updated the animator for the player controller for the attack state, executes the setup script again to set up everything in the scene again. It sets up a hurt animation, which I didn't ask it, but it's good that it did set it up. So when a player gets hit, it has a hit animation, which was also added to the asset pack, which it is setting up. Now it's checking for the compiler errors to make sure all the scripts it added and changes it did doesn't run into issues. After a screenshot just to check if the scene looks correct. And here you can see what it did. It adjusted the player so the on attack input value while I do this play attack action. So it set up the animation and the action. So it set it to left click to trigger the attack. And it has 3 attack animations that it found, so it's cycling through 3 of them when hitting, and didn't find any errors. Okay, so next I asked it to add a health system for the player and the enemy, so the player can take damage, the enemy can take damage. And then I also found issue with the player jumping. I could jump infinitely, so the ground check wasn't working properly. That meaning it wasn't detecting that it was constantly detecting that I was on the ground. So it was constantly saying I could jump. Then in the asset pack, there was also animation for dodge. So I asked it to add the dodge functionality to the player as well, and adjust the coin size because it is very small and not really realistic. And then I also told it to set up a UI for the coin picked up and the health and player stats. It sets up 7 tasks that it wants to do. And with Chat GPT 5.2, tells you all the reasoning it's going to go through and things it wants to do beforehand. That checks all the files, reads them. The player interactions, it updates how the interaction is working, setting up a script for UI HUD to display all the stats onto a UI for the player to see. The updates the player controller again, updates the player controller again for player, still doing it. And here it sets up like the logic and the behind the player taking damage, adds more checks to make sure for everything, and updates the ground check to make sure the player is grounded on before it can jump again. And here you can see the task list. So it's adding a reusable health component, fix the ground check to make sure you can't infinitely jump as I asked it, adds the dodge roll system, and sets up the damage system for the player and the bandit, changing the size of the coins in the scene, and setting up the UI for the player. And then obviously it verifies that there's no problems in the scene. Now it's gonna just checking for issues, logs, checking for compiler errors, and it wanted to create a setup script and realized there was already one. It realized it wanted to move something to a path that doesn't exist. So it's gonna creating a new path for it. Now it's creating the UI, setting up all the components in the UI. It creates the coin text, the health text, for the values of the health and the values of the amount of points you're collecting through coins. You can see here in the top left, it doesn't look like it's set up right, but I didn't realize my scale was at 1.1. I'll later realize that. Here I ran into a bit of an error. It says GPT 5.2 had a bit of a problem, but because of the task list, I just asked it to continue where you left off, and it continued exactly where it ended. Setting up the collectible system to when hitting it, it will be picked up. Updating the bandit AI the bandit AI had a problem when hitting the trigger for the coin, it would make the coin disappear, and I didn't want that to happen, so I had to adjust the bandit AI so that wouldn't trigger. And also set up the attack for the bandit. And the health. Updating the player controller, is updating the UI, setting properties to the UI, making sure everything is linked, setting the canvas properties. You can see here the canvas and the HUD setup. You'll see it now. Takes a screenshot to check if everything in the scene looks correct. You can see the coin size is a bit better. Setting up the dodge and a bit of invulnerability when dodging, so you won't take damage. Executing the auto wire script to attach everything to each other. I found an error in the execution of said script. It didn't execute properly. Adjust the script so that it will execute the script. Was successful. See, the coin is now proper size. It auto-adjusted after realizing it wasn't big enough. Now it's going to check for compiler errors. You can see all the tasks completed. Next screenshot to check. You can see the UI in the top left, and it's updated the task list 8 out of 8. It completed all the tasks. Here you can see everything that it did. So it added the health system for the hero and the bandit, handling how death works, and disables the collider of the enemy so that the player doesn't get stuck on the enemy. Fixed the jumping, no matter jumping, added a dodge roll with animation and invulnerability when dodging, added the damage system, adjusted the coin size, added UI to display everything, collectibles set up so that it adds to the score for the player. Okay, I ran it and I found two problems. The health on the UI was not updating for the player, the coin was. The coin was still disappearing when the bandit wears across it, and that was still a problem. And also found that the jumping of the player was a bit too low, so I wanted to make it a bit higher. Also the hurt animation, so I wanted to add a hurt animation to the player, so when it takes damage, they add that. And you can see the AI's reasoning. It wants to fix the UI issue where it's not updating properly. Updates the player controller for the UI to fix. You can see me testing it. The coin works, the health wasn't updating. The thing with Chat GPT 5.2, the first time I saw it happening, was it was activating play mode, which allows it to test. I didn't realize I shouldn't stop play mode. That's why it said error game is not playing. It adjusted the jump force for the player. Takes a screenshot to check the scene. Up to the task list. So it did everything on the task list, and here you can see everything it did. Updated the HUD so it should work. Coin disappearing when bandit touches it. Added extra checks to make sure it's only the player that can pick it up. Adds the hurt animation for the player when taking damage and increase the player jump height. So I told it now the UI was still not updating and the coin was still disappearing when the bandit interacted with it. So I told it to please fix those two things. So it's updating the UI to make sure it is properly updating, and then the player script to make sure the UI is properly updating to show the health stats. It's updating the UI HUD script just to make sure it is bound properly. Take a screenshot to check the HUD just to make sure it still looks correct. Adjust the coins values to make sure it only triggers when the player collides with it. Checking all the Unity logs. Now it's testing it with the play mode. You can see the player does take damage and it is properly updated in the HUD. And the coin worked as only the player triggered it and picked it up. It doesn't disappear from the bandit. It accidentally duplicated the event system and removed it. Just updating the HUD script. just fixing references in the scene to make sure the HUD is properly working. Executing said script, just getting all the info on the canvas. I was going to check for compiler issues to make sure everything was properly running, and updates the task list because it completed all that it needed to do. Take a screenshot to check. You can see, so collectible requires the player stats to get the enemy, so it only picks up when the player goes across it. And the UI HUD is set up so it properly works when taking damage. It updates. So now the next step I wanted to do was create a level to populate the level with enemy and coins. So a bit of a stage, and to populate it so the enemies and the coins are populated throughout the level. And then I wanted to make the coins usable for stat upgrades. Set up the task list, creating prefabs for the bandits and the coins so I can populate it. Added shop UI script for the buttons and the text. Just updating the script so that it can be accessible outside the script for the store. Update the shop UI script. Upgrade shop UI. Sets the on-click system for the shop. Ran into a bit of an error. You can see the task list it's set up. So it's creating a basic level layout, platforms in a 3D but in a 2.5D plane. Created reusable prefabs for the coin and the enemy. Then it's going to populate the level with those and adds the coin spend stat in the system so you can upgrade. Adding the UI for the upgrade menu. And then it's going to check for errors and fix it if needed. So it's setting up a shop interactor system, the UI, so that there's a shop to interact with. Sets a level root to set all the levels attached to. Yeah, it's creating the UI for the shop, creating the UI for all the buttons. Make sure it's all attached to the correct thing. You can see the button set up there. Execute the wire script setup for the UI. And obviously it deactivated it because it should only activate when the player activates it. It sets up the level with multiple platforms. There you go. You can see the one on the right there. Now taking a screenshot to check the scene to make sure it's all working. And it also moved all the platforms onto the level root. They had set up all the coins and the bandits populated the scene with them. You can see me testing it. I couldn't jump on that platform. I could jump on the lower one. So it was not working for that level root platform. Completed the task list because I thought everything was working correctly. You can see. So I decided to go and manually just fix this. I just removed that one block. You can see I'm jumping, but I just can't jump high enough. So everything it did, it said set up the level layout, it populated with coins, created reusable prefabs for everything, added the coin so you can upgrade stats, and added UI for everything. So the problem I had, you can see now on the scene, the coins weren't on top of the terrain, so this was couldn't get them. And then some of the bandits were also not spawning correctly, so I told it to fix the spawning with that. I told it to make sure that the character can always jump high enough to get onto the next platforms. And then also told it to create a texture for the platforms in the background. Creates a 5-step task list. You can see it's going to reposition coins so that make sure that it is on top of the ground, the platform that you can jump on. Increase the player jump height so that the platforms are reachable. And it's going to create the textures for the platform and then for the background and set up the background texture. And then make sure there's no compiler issues or problems in the scene. Yes, first creates a script to get the position of the platforms and make sure the coins are directly above them. Execute said script. And here it's generating a texture for the platforms and then one for the background. Up the materials, setting that for the background and setting up a plane for the background, changing the jump force. Then they assigned all the materials to the platforms. It zoomed out a bit there. I'll zoom back in. You can see there's the textures and materials on it now. It was just checking for compiler errors, takes a screenshot to check if everything's correct. Updated the task list to saying it's completed everything. You can see the coins are now on top and the bandits on proper position. So you can see it generated textures, applied the textures, adjust the jump height, and then make sure all the coins are in the correct position above the platform. And there weren't any compiler errors. Still not jumping high enough, but I decided to go and adjust it a bit myself. You can see it jumping high enough, all the platforms work, and the bandits spawn. I couldn't open the shop panel, so I was just checking here. So, and then I couldn't get the background to wasn't displaying, so I asked the shop, and the shop doesn't open when I press E as it set it up as. And then I also asked it to set up an endless level so it keeps spawning after passing certain blocks, so it endlessly goes on and on. It sets up the task list to fix the background, fix the shop on E, and it's going to set up an endless level spawn for the platform, the coins, and the enemies, and set up a system to call them after you are away from them. And then obviously check for errors. It's setting up a platform prefab for the spawning, making sure the camera is set up properly for the background and the UI. Now it's setting up the script for the endless level spawning. Did the player shop interaction. Set the property on here in night shop. Checking for compiler issues. Update the player shop interactor script to make sure it works. Gonna check for issues of that. Compiler. It's running. The shop upgrades is working, but I can't jump on the new terrain that's being spawned. Yeah, I went ahead and I fixed it myself in the end. I just needed the ground tag added to work. And I did that by adjusting the prefabs tag so that it applies to all the prefabs that are being spawned. So the two issues, the terrain generation stops after a bit, so I asked it needs to continue endlessly. And then I realized the enemies that are being spawned aren't attacking or going towards the player. So I told it to set that up. and fix it. Creates the task list. Getting the info from the files. You can see the task list it's set up. It's inspecting the endless level terrain. See how it can fix it. Fixes it. Inspect bandit AI. Fix the logic behind it to make sure it attacks and chases the player. Make sure all the references and everything are set up properly. And then check for compiler issues on run. Updates the endless level spawning. Updates the bandit AI. Just checking from compilers. 4 of the 6 tasks completed. Fixing the UI input. There you can see it's jumping, but the enemy is still not chasing the player. And here you can see it did it. So it says it fixed the enemy spawning and not chasing the player, fixed that. Added the UI. So that it doesn't spam the player, fix itself. It thought of doing it itself. And fix the infinite spawning for the endless gameplay loop. Upgrade shop working properly. Enemies are doing the attack motion, but they're not attacking. The spawning is still not endless, but shop is perfect now. So I said AI bandits are spawned, still don't attack the player. Let us focus on one thing at a time. Let's play mode to test. Still not doing it. And you can see the endless spawning is still not working. Later I'm going to tell it exactly how it should be handling the spawning, and that fixes it. So it is going around fixing the bandit AI to make sure it moves towards the player, and it's going to set up and that it attacks and deals damage to the player. Player's taking damage, jump. Try to fix the spawning, and you can see it's spawning a bit inside each other. So you see it fixed it for the bandits, and that was correct. So I tested it and I found the issue. So it's the bandits are dealing with damage. Doesn't matter where I am or how close I am to them every time they attack. So I said it's probably the hit range that is too fast. So I asked it to adjust that so it's only when I'm next to them. And fix the turning terrain. And it is spawning inside of itself. Added 3 task list for it. It's going to update the bandit AI to make sure it works properly and updates the level spawn again, and it's going to do play mode test, and you can see it's still spawning on top of itself. It completed it, so taking damage from nothing. So the bandit attack was triggering within stop distance, even if the player was in different height, separated by platform. So it makes sure the bandits only attack when it's within range of the player. Fix the endless spawner, but it's still not working properly. So I told it exactly inside the player and doubles up, which only spawn once the player reaches the last platform. So I ask it a bit more specific to make sure it understands what it needs to do. So here it's going to modify the level spawner to set up the spawning system. Found compilation errors, fixes it. The one script had a bit of coding issue. Fixes the script. Now checks for compiler errors again. Found none. And here it says it updated the script. Added a start gate on the last block to detect when the player passes it. It'll spawn the next stuff, the next terrain. And here you can see me testing it out. It's spawning properly, all running smoothly. Upgrades are working properly, health is upgrading, dodge and roll. We're just playing it, seeing how if it truly is endless.